honored to be part of the panel.
All right. No, thank you very much. I would like us to start with you in terms of. I would like to talk with you in terms of what you outline multilingualism. You want to take us.
Yes. So today we are exploring multilingualism and language as a symbol of heritage. I'm quickly going to introduce, just give you some background on the ATKV. Like I said, it's the Afrikaans Language and Culture Association. And we've been in existence for 90 years. Last month was our 90th birthday. And our aim is to create and promote language and culture endeavors which cater for all who want to be part of it. We strive to be inclusive and support the promotion of multilingualism. We are unique in the sense that we have a business section. For example, we have 7 holiday resorts throughout South Africa, and those profits and dividends that we make there, we put into these cultural and language projects. And for 90 years, we never been a political organization at all. So we only focus on language, culture. That's what we do. So yes, and I know the subject I'm trying to touch on today could be a bit sensitive. So I'm going to use within my segment Afrikaans, because I'm Afrikaans, as a case study. But by doing that, I'm not focusing on Afrikaans or any other official South African language. I'm rather focusing on the fact that all of us have our individual and unique home languages, or we can refer to it as a native tongue or mother tongue, and that we need to be proud of who we are and what language each one of us speak. And that's the first step in order to achieve social cohesion, because this whole webinar is about social cohesion. So I merely speak from my background, which is Afrikaans. Likewise, should you speak from your background. That's actually what I'm trying to get to. So please bear with me. And the other thing I just need to mention is, in order to get to social cohesion and a non-racial integrated community, we sometimes need to talk about the dividing factors. So to get to non-racial, we don't want to talk about color and all of those things and representation of this and that, but to get to that, we need to talk about these things. So let me just give you an example. I am, if I should describe myself, and if you should describe me, you would say I'm a white South African male, won't you? But that's very vague, I think, isn't it? Because if you put me together in a row, in a line, perhaps with those prison things up, if we're in prison and you need to take photos, and we are 5 white males, but one is from England speaking English, one is from American speaking American English, one is from Germany speaking German, French, you get my point, speaking French. Are we the same? We have the same skin color, but are we the same? No, we are not. Our cultures differ greatly. Likewise, with anyone in our country, if you are a black person and you're described as a black person, but you're a Venda, are you the same as a Sesotho? The cultures differ, and we need to get to social cohesion. I think we need to speak about these things. So please bear with me. I'm not trying to be racist or anything at all. I'm just saying we need to speak about the sensitive stuff as well. That's how we will start building bridges. So my question I'm asking to you, and you're most welcome to comment, or somebody can interrupt me if you want to answer me, but it's rhetoric, and I keep it there. Is the main question I'm asking today is, how can we utilize language as part of social cohesion? I don't have the answers.
Before you go on, GJ, let me just say the purpose of the webinar series from St. Francis is actually to talk about, literally everything, that which we regard as sensitive, that which just feels like threshing out more and so on. So this is the platform for everyone to actually input and say anything, of course, respectfully, from any point of view. So literally, this is an area where where we engage, as South Africans and as the global citizens. So you don't need to, apologize and so on. So just hit it. So just hit it.
So thank you. And what you've said now would be my answer. Platforms like this would be the beginning of using language as part of social cohesion. So yes, social cohesion, according to me, starts with a conversation, and we need language and languages to converse. So this conversation should exhibit cultures, our languages, and our heritages. Um, I quickly want to touch on two misconceptions. The one being that when we speak to one another in South Africa, we speak English, and it makes sense because we need a lingua franca, a language that everyone can kind of understand to understand one another. So we use English, but it's ironic. Why am I saying that? Because English is the only language which does not derive from Africa, which is part of one of our official languages. All the other official languages are deriving from Africa. So it could be debated that our lingua franca that we use in South Africa is not African. That's ironic. It's not the problem, but it's ironic. So my next rhetoric question is: if social cohesion should be prevalent, should we not have to converse in a lingua franca which stems from Africa, or at least treasures our African languages as the basis for social cohesion? And think about that. The next misconception I want to dwell on, because I'm Afrikaans, is I feel if we want to talk about language, multilingualism, social cohesion, and language, and all of that being part of our heritage, we need to first talk about who we are, each one of us, and we need to listen to one another. So I'm just going to use Afrikaans as a case study. I'm going to, for 3 or 4 minutes, just give you bits of info on Afrikaans. Perhaps you didn't know that. Perhaps it changes your mind on what you think of and about Afrikaans. It doesn't matter. But if I say, show me a picture of an Afrikaner, what would your picture be? Would it be a white man or male standing there in his valleys and his hat on a tractor? What would it be? If Make the picture for yourself, but let me tell you what Afrikaner actually really means. If you must translate Afrikaner, it means a person who speaks Afrikaans. So color is not involved in that, isn't? Is it? No, it isn't. Afrikaner is the noun for the verb, the action speaking Afrikaans, and Afrikaner speaks Afrikaans. That's what an Afrikaner is. The same with boer of boer. If I say boer, what do you see? A racist male, white. What do you see? Um, kill the boer. What do you see if you think of those images? But if you should say, what's the actual meaning of boer in Afrikaans? It's not white. It's not male. It's not racist. It's farmer. It is any farmer. So any farmer who farms on a piece of land or manages a farm in Afrikaans is a boer. Being he or she black, pink, purple, brown, white, it doesn't matter. That person will be named a boer in Afrikaans because that's our term for farmer. So that's interesting. The other interesting fact about Afrikaans and misconceptions we have is that according to the 2011 census, there are more or less 7 million Afrikaans speaking home language citizens in South Africa. Did you know that 60% of them are not white? That's interesting. So 6 out of 10 people in South Africa speaking Afrikaans as a home language is not white or are not white. 40% of them is white. So 4 out of 10. 50%, 5 out of 10 of them is colored or brown. That's interesting. And 9%, so that's almost 1 out of 10, is African. So 1 out of 10 people speaking Afrikaans as their home language in South Africa says they are African, not white or colored. And then 1%, which is very little then, is Indian. So it's interesting. Afrikaans is not really then a white language, is it? Just a brief history on Afrikaans. It's a Creole language. Do you know what Creole means? It's a combination of different cultures and languages creating a new language. So it evolved in the 19th century under colonialism in South Africa, and it roots mainly in Dutch. That's why people say it's a European language, but it isn't Dutch. It's mixed with seafarer variants, which is Malay, Portuguese, Indonesian, and many indigenous languages like Kwekwe, San, and other African languages. Just a thought, a Creole language, I said, is a mixture of different languages creating something new. Could we not perhaps take that as a metaphor, saying South Africa must be a Creole country? Not literally, but taking all the different cultures, not losing any one of them, and creating a unified South Africa with all of those cultures. Could be a nice metaphor. So just to come back to Afrikaans, Afrikaans was created to fulfill a need. What was the need? It was for different communities within the Cape Colony to communicate with one another. So,
Hello, DJ, that is
hello.
DJ. Hello.
Yes.
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 I see
Hello.
somebody, in the chat room is raising their hand. Are we going to be able to pick up that hand? Maybe
You
they
are
want to
welcome
engage
to.
with you.
Please.
Okay. Can you see? Yeah. I see somebody's raising their hand. Let's see if we can pick, if they can say something. Hello, Victoria.
Yes.
Hello. Doesn't seem interesting to hear what she wanted to say. So we'll keep trying to connect with herself. Okay. I see there Julie is saying very interesting topic, language denied, ignored, leads to a lost identity and culture. So yeah, I'll be interrupting you as we go, but continue. I was more keen, to
No,
hear
no,
an audio
perfect.
from
Please
Victoria.
interrupt me. I like to have it interactive. And I'm saying once again, I'm just taking Afrikaans as a case study. I'm not focusing on Afrikaans. So just bear with me. I'm almost finished with Afrikaans as a case study. Then I want to get into what I'm actually trying to say. So this is my introduction. Yes, let me just see, where was I? Oh, Afrikaans was there to fulfill a need. People needed to communicate, different cultures needed to communicate with others in the Cape Colony during the 1700s. And that's why Afrikaans originated. So it became, we can say, it became the lingua franca, the language everybody tried to speak to communicate with one another, like English in South Africa, of the then Cape Colony. Or it could also be a forerunner to something like Fanagalo, Fanagalo, which they mixture of languages to understand one another, working on the minds. But then if I ask you a question, what do you think was the first transcript translated into Afrikaans? Because we think Afrikaans is white, Christian. So should it be the Bible? Should it be some Christian document that was translated first into Afrikaans? No, it wasn't. It was the Quran, which is the religious text, or the Bible, if I can call it like that, of Islam or the Muslims. Interesting. It wasn't something Christian. And the term Afrikaner was created and named to the people staying in the colony, which were not white people, all the other cultures speaking Afrikaans. So it was not first termed as white people speaking Afrikaans. That's also interesting to me. I didn't know that. I only found that out while I did some research on this. So I'm closing off with Afrikaans as a case study. I want to close off by saying that the commonality of Afrikaans, which was shared by descendants of slaves, of indigenous people, and simply poor, ordinary people staying there, were lost due to a narrow ethnic nationalist cause. And that cause actually only came to being from the 1915, 20s, and it became into law in 1948 with apartheid. And that nationalistic cause destroyed the commonality and the origins of Afrikaans, according to me. So Afrikaans was later, when the nationalist cause came into being, constructed as a white language, as a white history with white faces. But according to me and the history, that's simply not true. So why am I telling you this? Are there any questions, or can I go on? Are we still fine? So I think it's important to note that each one of us celebrating Heritage Month and Day, living in a complicated country as South Africa, should know who we are individually. What is my heritage, my language, my culture? And then secondly, if we know who we are and we are fine with that, we can start to talk about it to one another and share all these gems with each other. So hopefully, just by sharing who I am, I could change or give you a bit of a different insight into the background of Afrikaans. I don't know, perhaps not. But the point of the matter is, in order to strive for social cohesion in this wonderful country of ours, we need to embrace who we are, and then we need to start sharing our uniqueness with each other. Sorry, I'm Afrikaans, so my English is not always that good. So knowledge is, after all, wisdom. If we gain knowledge about each other and ourselves, we gain wisdom. And then I read a very interesting article. I'm almost finished with my segment about. It was a recent article by Prof. Hans du Plessis from Northwest University, and he says, I'm quoting him, "Man is the language he speaks." Saying it again, man being man, woman, any person, is the language he speaks. He argues that our individual stories about heritage, language, and culture are best told in our mother tongues, in our home languages. So we need to tell our stories in our home languages. So that's where we should start. He says that the story of the Bapedi should be told in Sepedi. And because I'm Afrikaans, I must tell my story in Afrikaans. And so we can go on. If you say Sotho, your story must be in Sesotho. Because that is the root of social cohesion, where the origin. So in order to create social cohesion, we need to communicate. And that conversation should start in all of our mother tongues. Our success is found in our diversity. Let's celebrate our diversity. And if we start with a conversation like that, we will get to the stuff we never talk about, the stuff that we should perhaps say and apologize about, or the stuff that we should clarify. But that will never be, if we do it from this standpoint, it will be gracious, it will be compassionate, it will be loving, and that will never divide. It could only unite. It will give us understanding of one another. It will create respect, compassion, and a feeling of mutual belonging. And I'm quoting Prof. du Plessis again. He ends his article by saying that monolingualism, only speaking one language, or forcing people, which apartheid did to everyone, forcing everyone to speak only one language, and it's not being forced now, but we're also only speaking English. So monolingualism is the recipe for intellectual bankruptcy. We are becoming intellectually bankrupt because we are not sharing our cultures and our languages. So we must be careful of only using one language. That's what he says. So do you feel, my next question, my next thought, that our future could perhaps be positively altered by celebrating our diversity and creating conversations regarding our different heritages, languages, and cultures? What do you feel? I want to conclude. And then if you have questions, you are welcome or we can have a discussion. It would be even better. The National Heritage Council aims, I don't know if you know about the National Heritage Council, but they aims to build a nation proud of its African heritage. Hopefully I could also persuade you that Afrikaans could perhaps also be one of our African languages. So all of our languages need to be part of this beautiful African heritage of ours. They say, and I'm quoting them, the aim is not to create a melting pot where individual religious, cultural, and other differences disappear, but rather a society with a shared South African identity without detracting from our diverse multiple identity. So again, the metaphor of the Creole language, let's become a Creole country. Where we are not a melting pot. All of our cultures and languages disappear. That's not what we're saying. We're saying all of our languages and cultures and heritages appear within this unified South Africa that we start to create. And my question I leave you with then is, how do we start this conversation? And I want to close off, and I'm a very personal person, so I don't usually show things like this, but I thought it is adequate to show you a short video clip of my daughter. She's 4 years old, Hannah Kuzet. I also have a son, he's 2 years old, but and our nanny. And we asked our nanny when she started here working with us and for us that she must, if she's willing to only speak Sesotho to our children. I can't understand Sesotho. Ask Mrs. Mabureng. I can't understand Sesotho, but my children hopefully will be fluent in Sesotho, and they were just playing. Ironically, if you hear the background, there's an Afrikaans story that my child listened to while she was doing this whole act in Sesotho, and the nanny is filming it, was on her phone, and she just sent it to my wife. So all I'm trying to say is, when we start to acknowledge who we are, and we start focusing on our brothers and sisters in this country, all of a sudden, the breach of social cohesion, the breach of unity is not that far, it's not that difficult, it's actually already in place. And then small things like this shows me that there's really hope for us in this country. So I'm going to try and play the video for you. Hopefully you enjoy it.
Binapen. Maponisa.
Maponisa rikoje. Malekila he. Dirifi moto. Bakuma kasona.
Ana, ezanta demuhululu tulike.
Tate no to lika popoto. Ninsa kiboro. Shewana aka lika hopeya. Akira to win. Akira to steady.
I think we must clap for that. I think we must clap for that. I'm trying to find my mic. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I'm trying to unmute myself. You know, that is lovely. And I think we need to do more than we talk. And I would like to congratulate you for actually taking a step towards saying you can't just be preaching, you know, that people must be multilingual. And I like the fact that you started with the, you know, the little ones, so that already, you know, integral to their principles would be multilingualism. So thank you very much. So the question I was asking you is whether you can pick up the chat room, the messages in the chat room. There is one message from Dr. Charles Noaila. Can you see it? And are you able to respond to that?
There it is.
Let it read it out for you. It says quite an interesting topic. However, the issue of language and identity becomes extremely complex when it becomes blended with power and politics. How do you keep your culture from domination of other less powerful cultures?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, but I agree with what Dr. Charles is saying. And if you take the Afrikaans community, like I said, now 6 out of 10 people in South Africa speaking Afrikaans are not white. Yet, white Afrikaans is still dominating within the Afrikaans community. So it's a challenge, and within our Afrikaans community, not, and then it's a bigger challenge in the country. So yes, it's a challenge. I don't necessarily have the answer for, but I totally agree with you that politics buggered it up.
Buggered it up. Maybe we can ask, can any of the panelists, you know, maybe respond to that? Do you have an answer to that? language, the complexity of language and identity, power, and politics. What do you think about that?
I think that I actually have a follow-up question to Dr. Charles's question, and it's that we do know that Afrikaans is perceived in a certain way, and I'm more curious to know why that is true. I mean, historians and people who are within the field of language and history would know that it's a Creole language and that it's actually a result of multiple influences, but in just societal thought, it's thought to be a demographic of like a certain demographical language. So why do you think that is? And I think the answer to that is precisely what the question is trying to ask about power and domination. And it's saying that spaces that do occupy higher echelons of power, where Afrikaans is prevalent, are more, they have like that dominant power, which is why the narrative is that way. It is because of the kind of spaces that, if you understand what I'm saying.
No.
So the question is,
Yes, sorry.
sorry. Okay, so my question is then, how can we advocate for, and I'm an advocate for language as an identity thing, but how can we advocate for Afrikaans to be more than what it is, if we know that there is a demographic that is dominant in the history of it, in the story of its history, when we know that it's Creole?
Personally, I think we shouldn't advocate Afrikaans necessarily, but like I tried to say, is that we need to start with who we are, each one of us, and then we need to create opportunities where we can converse about that. Because the fact is, due to power and politics and 40 how many years of apartheid dominating everything in South Africa, forcing people to speak a language they don't even know, segregating people, that happened. And after 94, I think many white people withdrew from what happened in South Africa, because I don't know if they felt ashamed or I don't know. Each person must answer for themselves. But somehow, for more than 20 years now, this crucial conversation that we needed to have with one another, and like I said, in that conversation, sometimes the apologies and things, we can't change what happened, but at least we can talk about it and try to get and connect about things. I didn't even live in apartheid really, so I'm also almost past apartheid, but still, that doesn't change the fact that it happened. But the thing is, that conversation never started, and we've all the cultures, not only Afrikaans and whatever culture, all the cultures I think grew away or apart from one another, and that's the problem. I think we need to start advocating our own languages and start talking about that to build bridges. I don't know if that's answering anything, but that's what I think.
Okay, all right. No, thank you very much. We will relay the conversations as they come. I think at this point we must actually move on to the next input. From Uhuru Heritage. Ladies, do you want to take us through your presentation?
Yes. We're going to connect it just now.
Okay, let me start with our introduction so long while it loads. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having us. My name is Ntutso Maharaswa, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Lesotho Banteng, and together we're founders of Uhuru Heritage, which is an NPO. Today we'll be taking you through the background of what Uhuru Heritage is, some of the projects that we've done, and then the second half of the presentation will be taking you through the settlement establishment in the face of climate change. So, who is Uhuru Heritage? Uhuru Heritage, we like to consider ourselves to be so we like to reflect on issues, what that means. But more than that, we want to advocate for people just being more open to learning about their own heritage. We believe that heritage, particularly African heritage, is not something that should be left in the past. So I think in order to better understand what the organization is about, we need to get into why the organization was established and what influenced its conceptualization. So we started the organization as a result of two fundamental sort of questions and design we had. The first one was an crossroads between our identity as millennial women, but we also had a strong desire to maintain our identity as Africans, particularly African women. So we started asking questions around heritage. What does heritage mean? What does freedom mean? Particularly in this day and age. And the second desire that we had was the social injustices were prominent. And we felt that as Africans, there are so many concepts such as Ubuntu, different concepts and different influence, like the sense of community that Africans have. So we found that the answer to our two dilemmas was found in what we perceived as heritage. Hence, heritage in the name. And Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. So together, I would like to loosely translate it, freedom to exist in whatever form that means to you. So because heritage is who it is, we spend some time discussing what we actually mean by heritage. Like, what are we asking to actually express? So when it comes to heritage, there are many different definitions of heritage, but also it becomes a little bit broad and subjective because in daily conversation, we hear people talking about heritage, but we don't actually have a concept of what it is. So we decided to go with the notion that was presented by Perez and Obina, which instead of defining heritage, they gave us underlying principles that they used to make a model of cultural heritage. So I'm going to try my best to do justice to their work and explain some of the principles and how they relate. The first principle to cultural heritage is that we see heritage not as a mass, but as discrete entities that are interlinked to different degrees. So when we talk about these entities, we're talking about the tangible ones. We're looking at artifacts, we're looking at music, we're looking at the environment, but we're also talking about intangible ones. We're thinking value systems, we're thinking about the knowledge that is passed on. And those interrelated entities are what, when come together, form what we know as heritage. But alone, these entities could be relevant, but not necessarily heritage. So what makes them heritage? And what makes them heritage is the value that people place on these entities. Not just value, but consensus within a community about the value. So the more a community begins to value a certain entity, then the deeper it becomes enriched in the community. And once there is sufficient, you'll argue what sufficient consensus is, then those elements become what we define as heritage or parts of heritage. So I hope that clears up a little bit of the background of what influences the projects that we do. And I thought maybe I should take you through some of the projects so that you can see how these themes kind of tie into all our projects. So one of the projects that we did was the 21st Century Artisan, where we met up with young people who have decided to take on artisanship in different trades as their career paths. And we sort of linked it to historical roles and perceptions of artisanship in African communities. And the other project that we had is called Debale, where we encourage people to share the stories that they grew up hearing in the language that they heard it in. Yeah, I think we had that. But also, we wanted to share these stories and also kind of have a preservation method. So by everyone sharing their stories with us, we figured we can share and preserve. But Uru Heritage also, as I mentioned, one of our desires was to really make an impact. And we believe that if we go back into history, we can use some of the heritage principles and elements to uplift our communities socioeconomically, just their everyday lives. So we didn't want to just be all talk and not actually like helping people. So we've had two major projects. The one is where we identified a center in Madidi community that it's a preschool to the community. It educates the older members of the community, and it also is a safe haven for people who have been affected by gender-based violence. I'm a little bit hesitant to say victims because I don't want to have a victim mentality. But sometimes that's what it is. Okay, and then lastly, the most recent project was the lockdown relief parcels. So in collaboration with two other wonderful women, Irene and Sibe, we were able to get donations and make food parcels and deliver food parcels, 100 of them, to an informal settlement. So as I've kind of touched on, our projects are funded by donations, the kindness of people. Africans are the kindest people. We also do web design and other creative projects. And then the money that we get, 100% of that goes towards our projects as well. And then the last form is collaboration. So we collaborate with individuals, we collaborate with private companies and government to fund these projects. So those are some past projects, but I'm so excited about this next project that we have. My colleague Lesakha is going to take you through it. So over to her.
Okay, thank you everyone. So actually, this kind of project is really, really centered in heritage. Like a lot of the projects that we do consider so many aspects of heritage, but this one was like considering a lot of tangible and intangible aspects of heritage, because it really dove into the past with research. The project is really centered around Barlomboratsidi, which is the Tswana clan in Makhomistat Northwest. And so really the aim of this project was, or how I'm going to present this project to you, is to kind of show the intersectionality of heritage and climate change, right? So for a while, we've been thinking that only now are we aware of climate change or the effects of climate on the way people settle. But this has been a recurring theme in specifically the Barlong clan. They used migration as a source of dealing with the harshness of climate. So we used to see this as this like random action that Africans do, but it's an African way of managing one's environment. And a lot of African heritage ways to do this have been underestimated and seen as organic or random. But the point of this project, which is inspired by a thesis that I did for the University of Cape Town, really did a lot of research to sort of disprove this idea that African settlements are random. So we basically looked at the types of rituals and totems and ceremonies that Africans use to regulate the environment. For example, totems were used as a way of preserving wildlife. So if your tribe's totem is a kudu, you're not allowed to hunt the kudu. And so that is a way of regulating one's natural environment. And before it can be seen as some random thing and some mysterious thing, but it's actually a conscious cosmological climate awareness of the tribe. And so that's kind of why the project is necessary, linked with heritage, is because it is. These two things are intertwined in environment and heritage. And so why is the project needing to happen in Makhomistat specifically? So the global annual rainfall is 700 millimeters, right? Johannesburg, same. But in Makgobistad, the average is 300 millimeters. And these places in Northwest rely heavily on agriculture. So imagine Joburg is a city and it has so much rain and we still complain. But imagine a place like Makgobistad that's reliant on this economy, how being a semi-arid space can affect them. So this kind of environment really draws a thin line for these kinds of environments between semi-arid and desert. And so this is where the project focuses on the concept of desertification. So what is desertification? It's when basically good productive land, well, dryish, can be turned quickly into non-productive desert due to poor management practices. And this space, Makgobistad, has been threatened by that. Proof of that is a lot of bare soil that you see in the spot. And unfortunately for them, the geology is too well drained. So water just goes away quickly, but that would be great if the aquifer had not dropped by 5 meters in the past few years. So if you had dug a borehole 5 years ago, your borehole can no longer reach the water. And so a lot of the communities are suffering. And so what causes desertification? Like I said, poor land management practices such as, and this is being studied and evident in Makgobistad, having your domesticated animals roam freely. They can very easily overgraze, and that can cause bare soil. And bare soil really doesn't allow rainwater to infiltrate the ground and replenish the aquifer. And so really that is the sense of this project, is trying to replenish the aquifer by preventing desertification. It's not there yet, but I think if we can prevent it from happening, which is crawling, we can get more benefits by replenishing the aquifer. And so going back to the idea of heritage, right? So one of the solutions that we're proposing to replenish the aquifer is a traditional, culturally significant sort of mechanism all the way from Burkina Faso, which is another semi-arid space in North Africa. So this strategy is so great in that you can literally do stone lining, but it doesn't need a whole lot of machinery and a big budget. The community can come together, collect stones, and line them at each contour in order to slow down runoff. And it can be contextualized. Like, for example, we were thinking in Makgobistad, there are mud bricks, which are an existing local community, and that can be used to line instead of the rocks. And those are things that we're currently delving into in our research for this project. So stone lining has been proven to work in Burkina Faso, and we see a lot of potential for this in Makgobistad to help replenish the aquifer and prevent desertification. But it is important also delving into heritage, how this project can happen. And so as we have researched and looked at the sort of intangible and tangible heritage of the Barolong clan, we've seen that communication in very specific hierarchies is very important. And so the first phase of this project would be community participation. So, and this would happen way before the project happens. And so the aim of this is not to inform the community about this new idea that we have, but to involve them in the conceptualizing of this project, because we value their knowledge and what they know about their own space, about their own heritage. And so that would be the first part of the project. And the second part of the project, seeing how the project has unfolded in spaces like Burkina Faso, we would actually need to make equipment. So identifying contours is something that you can do with some very expensive geological technology, but there's also a very accessible way to do it. And this way will be better suitable for empowering communities, which is really what our organization prioritizes. We don't want communities to rely on us or need us with the projects that we do, but we rather aim to empower them so they can sustain themselves. And so the second phase would be funding the equipment and making the equipment and teaching the community, so that at the implementation phase of the project can happen at a broad scale and then at an individualized scale, so that somebody in their own yard, in their own home, can implement this kind of thing to replenish their own aquifer, or just do some farming on their own plot. And so, but the most important part of this project, because it's such an experimental project in this context, is progress assessment over time. So we would have to, year by year, after every rainy season, check if the aquifer is actually being replenished. And probably that would be the most expensive part, drilling a borehole. That would be like the research component of it all. And so we definitely need money for this project. But thank you guys for listening. And this project, man, we like collaborations. So if you have something to say, want to collaborate, please let us know. What is important is that each of us know our heritage and appreciate our heritage and are free to conceptualize it in our own unique ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Uru ladies. I don't know whether you think it's, we still say not yet Uhuru, but you're saying your Uhuru heritage. So talk us through that. Have we got Uhuru?
Sorry, please say that again.
Have we gotten Uhuru
yet?
No, which is why it's our aim. This is why it's our aim to have people be free to express their heritage, but definitely not yet Uhuru.
Yeah. Uhuru. Okay. Now I want to check with you. If we're talking human settlements, we're talking things beyond housing. How would your model work for shopping complexes, parks?
For shopping complexes and what?
Parks.
Parks.
And parks.
Okay, so the research is quite specific to a rural context, and just doing our own research, like malls and parks are not very popular things in the rural context. But the model really, which is more about replenishing the aquifer and trying to make more water sustainable sort of rural communities, that wouldn't factor that in. So maybe over the long run, if the agriculture in rural settlements is able to recover, sort of contextual markets and commercial and economies can happen. So I think that in the research, we've tried to stray away from trying to globalize everything and saying that specific environments have their own lexicon. And so I'm definitely more interested in seeing, especially this question that's popped up, saying that how can technology and advancement complement, how can they complement the existing sort of cultural norms that, so we have to be careful that like 4IR and those things don't create erasure, right? Because there is, and erasure in that, will it really give people access? And so when we're trying to be very pragmatic about how things will happen, we have to look at individuals, and the individual in a rural community that has the least resources whatsoever, how can that person survive and sustain themselves? Just a survival kind of mechanisms. And then definitely in the new age, and as time continues, 4IR and those things can come in my mind as a parallel secondary thing, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, and I'm going to take it a little bit out of context and just relate it to heritage, because we actually watched one of the most incredible TED Talks where in Somalia, actually, they're using 4IR and they're using technology to preserve, what is it?
Archaeological.
There we go. So archaeological artifacts and landscapes. So as much as 4IR has its negatives depending on the context, we definitely see it as also being very beneficial, because they were able to record a land space that was, and we know with climate change, it might not be there forever, but by the next day, they were able to have it in electronic form. So at least we're still preserving heritage and history with the help of 4IR. So
yeah, so I think that if 4IR cannot create erasure of culture and heritage, it can very much complement it at the same time. Because people, I mean, I've personally gone to my grandmother's village in Makhubistad, and there are satellite dishes everywhere, and like people have computers, so it's not really in the past. I think we've definitely tried in our research to acknowledge that rural areas can also be developed and can also grow. But I think that with this project, it was more eminent to look at something that is accessible. And yeah, and that doesn't, just because something is made out of wood or rock doesn't mean that it's behind. I think that's our argument, is that a lot of African heritage tools have been perceived as behind or of the past, but we're saying these are things of the now, because in the Green Council, and when people are assessing why a building is sustainable, a lot of architects are using strategies from villages, from rural areas. So it cannot be a problem to have those same villages and rural areas use those very same technologies. It's not a past thing. Heritage is now, it is here, it is us. And so it should be used parallel to 4IR. You know, they are two very complementary things. And if 4IR can assist in identifying spaces, because identifying spaces in the community, like drones that are more drought prone, then all of that is what we're going to explore and what we actually intended on trying to do. So it will always be like a very positive tool, but if it's complementing things, yeah. I don't know.
But thanks for the question.
Thank you. That was a very, very good question.
Okay. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, ladies. I see there are lots of comments in the chat room, but I think we also need a break. So maybe you can play for us the music, and I'm going to ask all the participants to hit up the Jerusalem challenge before DJ Raps comes in. So please play us the Jerusalem clip, and I'm going to ask all of us to dance. It's a competition of the panelists now, the dance competition with the panelists. Let's hear it.
I just need to be up. I can't dance.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami ilondoloze 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 zungangishilana ilondoloze 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 zungangishilana dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami Jerusalema ikhaya lami ilondoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami ilondoloze 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 zungangishilana ilondoloze 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 zungangishilana dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana ilondoloze zuhambe nami dawo yami ayikholana